My name is Elias Thorne, and for as long as I can remember, I have lived in the shadow of a name that never felt like mine. People in Chicago know me now as a community organizer, a man who spends his days advocating for tenants who can't afford rent hikes, for single mothers struggling to feed their families, for the voiceless who are buried under the weight of powerful systems. They see me standing in crowded halls, rallying for justice, my voice steady, my resolve unshaken. But beneath that calm exterior lies a history, an unhealed wound carved into me long before I understood what injustice even meant. I was born into the Thorne family, a name that conjured images of towering glass skyscrapers, sprawling estates, and a father whose handshake could make or break entire neighborhoods. Reginald Thorne, my father, was a man spoken of with awe and fear. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a ruthless property magnate whose empire stretched across cities. But to me, he was nothing more than a figure in the background, a looming shadow who rarely looked at me long enough to see the child beneath. The Thorne mansion was a fortress of wealth, glittering chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls, polished marble floors that echoed with every lonely step, and endless rooms filled with expensive silence. For most, such grandeur would feel like paradise, but for me, it was a cage of coldness. I can still picture those mornings in the cavernous dining hall, the tables stretched longer than most streets in the neighborhoods I serve today. Sunlight would filter in through high windows, landing on silverware that gleamed like tiny daggers. Across from me, my father would sit in his tailored suit, eyes buried in market reports, hands tapping impatiently at his phone. "Finish your meal, Elias," he would mutter, never looking up, his tone more command than care. Those words felt less like advice and more like dismissal, as if I were another duty he had to check off before rushing to his empire. When I was 4 years old, the fragile illusion of family I clung to shattered. My father remarried Isabella, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her cunning. With her sleek auburn hair, calculating green eyes, and a smile that never reached her heart, Isabella transformed the mansion into her stage. From the very beginning, I was nothing more than an unwelcome relic of a past she wanted erased. She didn't have to say it outright. Her sharp looks, her whispered remarks, the way she excluded me from every gathering spoke louder than words. Soon, Isabella and my father had children of their own. Marcus came first, 5 years younger than me, already spoiled with the assurance of being the heir. From the moment he could walk, Marcus wore arrogance like a crown. He strutted through the house as though it were built solely for him, his smirks constantly reminding me that I didn't belong. Then came Sophia, 7 years younger, delicate and sweet on the surface, but quick to mimic her mother's cruelty. "Why so alone, Elias?" she'd giggle, her laughter echoing against the marble walls. "No one likes a loner." I tried to vanish into corners, to find solace in the quiet of my room overlooking the manicured lawns. But even in solitude, the weight of exclusion pressed down. I was the ghost of the Thorne family, present, but never acknowledged. My father's presence was rare, and when it did occur, it was as though I was speaking to a wall made of stone. "Not now, Elias," he'd snap when I dared to ask for his attention. The greatest wound came whenever I asked about my mother. There was a void where her memory should have been, a silence that suffocated me. Once, I gathered the courage to ask, "What was she like?" The response was fury. His fist crashed against the table, his voice thundered, "Stop prying." I never asked again. But the unanswered questions festered, becoming a shadow that never left me. Isabella, on the other hand, poured her affection onto Marcus and Sophia as though they were extensions of herself. Marcus was praised endlessly, the future tycoon of the Thorne Empire, while Sophia was showered with gifts and indulgence. And me. I learned to rely on myself. Books became my refuge, education my escape route. If they wouldn't see my worth, I would carve it elsewhere. By the time I was 18, I could no longer breathe within those marble walls. I walked out with nothing but a scholarship letter, a suitcase, and a determination to never return. My new home was a cramped apartment in a rough neighborhood of Chicago, where the walls peeled and the pipes groaned in protest. Yet, for the first time, I felt free. No crystal chandeliers, no silent breakfasts, no cruel laughter. Just me, and the possibility of building a life that had meaning. It was in those years that I discovered my calling. The people I met were not powerful, but they were resilient. Families who had been evicted, workers fighting unfair wages, children growing up without enough food. Their struggles mirrored my own feelings of neglect, and in helping them, I found purpose. Organizing protests, advocating for tenants, fighting for social justice, it became my heartbeat. Every victory, no matter how small, felt like healing. My contact with the thorns dwindled to near nothing. Holidays passed with only obligatory phone calls filled with awkward silence. On the rare occasions Isabella or Marcus reached out, it was to flaunt their wealth, to remind me of what I didn't have. Their lives were filled with banquets, yachts, luxury vacations, mine with community halls and late-night planning sessions. But I never envied them. For the first time, I was living authentically. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the hospital rang. My father, Reginald Thorne, had suffered a fatal stroke. For a moment, I felt nothing, just a hollow emptiness. I had long buried the hope of reconciliation, but hearing of his death cracked something deep inside me. I attended the funeral, standing at the back as dignitaries and business magnates poured in, praising the man who had built an empire. To them, he was a legend. To me, he was a stranger who had never truly been my father. The will reading followed, held in a sleek office overlooking the city skyline. Isabella sat tall, her eyes glittering with anticipation. Marcus leaned back with smug confidence, and Sophia clutched her designer bag with nervous excitement. The attorney read out the details: the empire, the shares, the mansion, the vehicles, all left to Isabella, Marcus, and Sophia. And then, my name. For me, there was no fortune, no estate. Instead, the attorney slid across the table a simple envelope. Inside, I found a one-way ticket to Lyon, France, an address written in my father's hand, and a faded photograph of a graceful woman standing before a historic chateau. Marcus erupted in laughter. A ticket? Dad's sending you packing. Sophia joined in, her voice dripping with mockery. Maybe you'll busk on the French streets. Isabella's smile was the cruelest of all, icy, triumphant. As if she had finally erased me, humiliation burned through me, but beneath it was something else, an inexplicable pull. That photo, the address, the note scrawled on the back: seek the truth if you dare. What truth? What had my father hidden all these years? Back in my apartment, their laughter replayed in my head, but so did the words on that note. Days passed, and the envelope sat on my desk, staring back at me like a challenge. One night, unable to resist any longer, I packed lightly, took the ticket, and boarded a plane. As the lights of Chicago faded beneath me, I felt both terrified and strangely hopeful. The journey led me to Lyon, a city alive with beauty and history. The address guided me to a vine-clad villa, the Laurent estate. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door. It opened slowly, revealing a woman in her late 40s, silver streaking her dark hair, her kind eyes instantly familiar. "I'm Elias Thorne," I stammered, holding up the faded photograph. Her eyes welled with tears as she stepped forward, pulling me into an embrace I had been starved of my entire life. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling, "my son. I've waited 25 years." Her name was Genevieve Laurent. In the elegant parlor of her home, she unfolded the story I had been denied my entire life. She and my father had once been in love, young, hopeful, and defiant against her powerful family. When she became pregnant with me, they planned to build a life together. But her family, the Laurents, were influential financiers who disapproved of Reginald's ambition and his lack of social standing. They pressured her to leave him, threatened her dreams, and when the conflict grew unbearable, Reginald took me and left, bitter and determined to raise me without her. I listened in silence, my heart unraveling with every word. My childhood of loneliness and neglect, the years of wondering who I was, the silence that suffocated me, it all made sense now. When she finished, I told her my story in return. I spoke of the mansion's coldness, Isabella's cruelty, Marcus and Sophia's taunts, and the way my father erased her from my life. Tears fell from her eyes as she held me close, vowing, "You're home now, Elias. You will never be alone again." In the weeks that followed, DNA tests confirmed what her heart already knew. The Laurents welcomed me cautiously at first. My grandparents, Henri and Claire, struggled with guilt for the pressures they had once imposed. But when the truth could no longer be denied, they embraced me with apologies and regret. For the first time, I felt the warmth of a family feast, laughter ringing not as mockery, but as love. Yet even in this newfound warmth, a part of me remained cautious. Could I truly belong here? Could a life built on shadows finally step into the light? I didn't know then that. The weeks that followed my arrival at the Laurent estate unfolded like a dream I wasn't sure I deserved. After years of being treated as an intruder in my own home, the sudden embrace of family felt almost unreal. Genevieve never let a day pass without making up for lost time. We would walk through the gardens together, her arm linked with mine, her voice soft as she recounted stories of her youth, how she loved to paint the Rhone at sunrise, how she once dreamt of being more than her family's obedient daughter, how she had imagined a life with my father that was stolen from her. For the first time, someone wanted to know me. Not the image of me, not the obligation of me, but the real Elias. She listened to my stories of activism in Chicago with tears glistening in her eyes, pride filling her voice when she said, "You have turned pain into purpose, my son." That sentence alone healed something inside me that had been broken for as long as I could remember. The Laurent household was grand, but unlike the Thorne mansion, it wasn't a museum of wealth. There was warmth here, and noise, cousins who teased but with affection, grandparents who apologized more than once for the role they had played in forcing Genevieve apart from my father. My grandfather Henri, tall and sharp-eyed despite his age, was cautious at first. He asked me questions about my work, my views, my intentions. Slowly, he began to see that though I had not been raised with their fortune, I carried something of equal value. Perspective. I'll never forget the night he invited me to sit with him in his study. The walls were lined with books, the air thick with the scent of old leather and ink. He poured 2 glasses of wine and said, "Elias, our family built its wealth through finance and investment. But we lost something along the way, connection to people beyond numbers. I believe you can bridge that gap." I sat stunned. In my father's world, I had always been dismissed. Yet here, my grandfather looked at me as though I had something important to offer. As days turned into months, I began attending family meetings, observing how the Laurents managed their empire. At first, I felt out of place, surrounded by polished businessmen and sharp-tongued investors. But Genevieve encouraged me, whispering before one meeting, "Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles." I did. I spoke about risk-averse strategies, about investing not only for profit, but for people, programs that could benefit both the company and the communities they touched. At first, there was silence. Then Julian, one of my cousins, leaned forward with interest. "He's right," he said. "We've been ignoring opportunities to create sustainable value." Slowly, heads began to nod. Those small victories fueled my confidence. I was no longer the unwanted Thorne child. I was Elias Laurent, contributing, belonging. Lyon began to feel like home. Evening walks along the Rhône with Genevieve became a ritual, the city lights flickering across the water as we shared laughter, regrets, and dreams. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. But life has a way of testing us, just when we believe we've found peace. It came in the form of a video call one evening. I answered reluctantly, and there she was, Isabella. The woman who had spent decades ensuring I felt unwanted now appeared disheveled, her face lined with worry. Behind her, I glimpsed Marcus slumped on a couch, a bottle half empty beside him, and Sophia wiping tears with tissues that littered the floor. Elias, Isabella began, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. We need your help. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. She continued, the Thorn Empire, it's gone. Your father left us more debts than assets. The mansion has been seized, the accounts drained. We have nothing left. Marcus groaned in the background, tell him to send money. He's rich now with his new family. Sophia's voice was quieter, broken. Please, Elias. We're lost. A part of me wanted to laugh, to relish the irony. 4 years they mocked me, excluded me, treated me like an outsider. And now, when their empire collapsed, they turned to me, the son they had disowned. Rage surged through me, but beneath it was something else. Not satisfaction, but emptiness. I had always thought vindication would feel sweet, but instead it left me hollow. I told Genevieve everything. She listened quietly, her hand resting gently on mine. When I finished, she said, my son, vengeance will not heal you. Compassion does not mean forgetting, but it does mean choosing who you become. Her words stayed with me. Days later, I agreed to return to Chicago, this time not as the broken child of the Thorn Mansion, but as a man who had discovered his worth. When I walked through the gates of the mansion, it was no longer the fortress I remembered. It was stripped bare, its grandeur reduced to echoes. Isabella stood with Marcus and Sophia, their faces etched with desperation. We're ruined, Isabella said, her voice quivering. Please, Elias. You're our only hope. Marcus sneered, still clinging to pride even in ruin. You owe us. You're a thorn. I met his gaze steadily. No, Marcus. I owe you nothing. I am not defined by this house, or its name. Sophia broke down, tears streaming. I'm sorry, Elias. For everything. It was then Genevieve stepped forward. Her presence filled the hollow mansion with dignity. Elias owes you nothing. But out of compassion, we will provide a modest stipend. On one condition, no further contact, no more poison. This ends here. Silence followed. Marcus muttered curses under his breath, but he didn't refuse. Isabella looked away, shame shadowing her once proud face. Sophia nodded through her tears. As we left the mansion, I felt a weight lift. Not because I had defeated them, but because I had chosen to release myself from their chains. For the first time, I was not running from the thorns. I was closing the chapter. Before returning to Lyon, I visited my father's grave. I stood there for a long time, staring at the name etched in stone, Reginald Thorn. I placed flowers on the ground and whispered, I forgive you. You stole my childhood, but in the end, you gave me a path to truth. That ticket, that address, it led me home. I will carry both the pain and the lessons, but they will not define me. When I returned to Lyon, I poured myself into building something meaningful. With the support of the Laurents, I began blending activism with enterprise, creating programs that funded social housing, scholarships, and opportunities for those who, like me, had once been voiceless. My dual heritage, Thorn and Laurent, became less a conflict and more a bridge. Nights on the balcony of the Laurent estate, I would look up at the stars and reflect on the journey. From a boy neglected in a mansion to a man standing between two worlds, I had learned truths that no inheritance could buy. I realized that true family is not defined by blood, but by love, respect, and mutual support. That wealth without compassion is a hollow victory. That resilience, forged in the fires of neglect, can become the greatest gift of all. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness is not about excusing the past, it's about freeing yourself from its hold. My story is not one of revenge, but of redemption. And if there is a lesson I would leave with anyone who listens, it is this: never let the disdain of others define your worth. Sometimes rejection is the doorway to discovery, and sometimes the family you lose paves the way for the family you find. As I stand here now, no longer hidden in the shadows, I know this truth with every fiber of my being: the light of your destiny will always find you, even if it must cut through years of darkness. And when it does, embrace it, not with bitterness, but with the strength of someone who has finally learned to belong.